Bulk loading 35mm film is one of those things that I've meant to do for a really, really long time because it can allow you to just like have some rolls of film on hand, which is great, and can also save you a bit of money. But there are some things that are worth knowing about what's available and exactly how this whole thing works. So let's walk through how to do it, what you need, what's available, how much money you might be able to save, but also some drawbacks to the whole thing. This is a film bulk loader. It is designed to take 100-foot rolls of bulk 35mm film, which you can then cut down into small, convenient rolls for shooting in your camera. There's a bunch of different bulk loaders out there, but they all accomplish like the same thing. They're light proof once they're closed up, and they can take reloadable film canisters. You can get plastic or metal reloadable canisters that are actually designed for bulk loading. Alternatively, you can also just reuse old film canisters as well. You can tape new film onto the little bit that's sticking out after you process the film that's inside of these, as long as there is still a bit of film sticking out to be able to do this. And then you need a bulk roll of film, and these are 100-foot lengths. You have to handle this stuff completely in the dark. The Ilford roll that I have says this very, very clearly. If you do open it in the light, you're gonna ruin this film. I shouldn't have to reiterate, but I will just for clarity's sake. You can't do this even if you have like a red light in a dark room. Red lights are only for certain types of film that are not sensitive to red light. And that does not include most black and white film or like any color film. So the red light is not an excuse to just go cracking these things open. You're gonna be really, really disappointed. Believe me. My bulk loader is a day roll branded one, I believe, but there are somewhat more popular ones that you can get. This one's pretty similar to the Kaiser film loader, I believe. It's a very similar design and just the way it threads up and takes the film. There's also the Lloyd one, which is really basic and simple as well. That's a pretty solid one. And then there's these like long ones that are, I believe, made by Alden, and some other names might also make ones of the same design. I don't like these ones. Those ones I just find to be kind of like clunky and awkward sometimes. But that's just my personal stance. Those like oblong ones have been around for a really long time as well. To demo this, I do have a roll of 35mm film that is just a dummy roll. It's been exposed. This is useless film now. I can't use this anymore. But in the dark, I would load this onto the center core and then thread it up and around the spiked roller here so that it could come out into this little area, which is where you will put your empty canisters. The whole thing is light tight once you close it up, so you won't be ruining this if you're doing the actual loading part in some light to see what you're doing exactly. The bulk loader will have a little area where you put an empty 35mm film canister. Using some tape, I've used Scotch tape before. I've also used like some gaffer's tape, electrical tape. I do think Scotch tape is usually perfectly fine. Just be sure that as you're getting closer and closer to the end of the roll, then you don't want to start really advancing aggressively because you might pull the tape off of the spindle. These plain black plastic ones are perfectly fine. They've got a little bit of felt at the edge here, just like normal canisters do as well, and they're super easy to use. The metal ones are okay as well, but I found that they can be a little more finicky, and the plastic ones have a top cap that actually screws on, whereas this one just kind of snaps into place. And like I said, if you have leftover canisters from other rolls, then you can just kind of tape new film onto it and wind into those. You want to pull out as little film as possible here because this is the end of your roll and you can easily lose the last frame on your roll when you're bulk loading. Once it's secure, you just put it into place, you close the little compartment, and then you just slowly wind film into that canister. A lot of bulk loaders have a indicator on them. This allows you to tell exactly how many shots you can fit onto the roll that you're loading. Once you're done, you just open it up, you cut the film, you make a little cut so that you can properly load it into the camera. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You don't have to cut like a fully shaped leader that normal film comes with. It just has to be something that you can slot into the compartment of your camera so that it will properly catch and advance. Once you're done, all you have to do is just repeat until you've loaded up all the canister that you have. You can buy a bunch of these in bulk and you can just slowly load up an entire roll at once, and it only takes like a bit of time to do it. Or you can just let a bulk roll sit in your bulk loader for months and just kind of slowly chip away at it. Bulk loading is a great way to slowly become more accustomed to how you can properly handle film and the damage that might incur just from mistakes that happen as well, and things that help you to learn more about shooting this format and using it. One of the big drawbacks that I'm sure is on a lot of people's mind when it comes to bulk loading is that bulk rolls are unfortunately only primarily available in black and white as opposed to being available in color options, which would be great, but black and white is super, super important. And if people out there are only shooting color, and I know a lot of you are, I really, really urge you to branch out to black and white because it is something that's going to be around for a long time. There are a lot of options, and it's one of those things that is always probably going to be way cheaper than most color stuff as time goes on. You can get bulk rolls for things like HP5, FP4, Tri-X, T-Max, Ultrafine, which means that you can explore a lot of these film stocks in really great detail. Having a bunch of these rolls on hand means that you can just become really familiar with what you're shooting and really understand the film's characteristics, what works best for it, the different ratings that you can shoot it at and what you can get away with, the great conditions for it, its pros and its cons, and like how best to develop this stuff. And there is the price aspect to all of this as well, because it does result in some cost saving if you do the math. I'm going to use B&H photo prices here because those are probably pretty universal, and I'm going to talk in American dollars because sometimes when I talk in Canadian dollars, people get confused. 100-foot bulk rolls will give you about 18 36 exposure rolls. So 18 individual rolls with 36 exposures apiece. You're not guaranteed that amount because you have to do it right, but that is approximately how many rolls you can get from a 100-foot bulk roll. Bulk roll of HP5 will run you about $105. 105 divided by 18 means that you're paying about $5.85 per roll, 36 exposure roll of HP5. A little bit more if you counter in tax, but that's approximate. Just outright buying a 36 exposure roll of HP5 is about $8.12. So you're saving a couple of bucks per roll, and that kind of stuff adds up. The Kodak bulk rolls, of course, being Kodak, are more expensive. You pay about $120 for a 100-foot roll of Tri-X. $120 divided by 18 means that you're getting each roll for about $6.70 in comparison to just buying 36 exposure rolls of Tri-X where you pay about $8.85. So it's not an incredible amount of money, but it is a little bit on each roll, and that kind of stuff adds up because film's an expensive hobby and there's a lot that goes along with it. A little bit of money that you might save from bulk loading can easily go towards like home developing stuff and chemicals so that you can also do all of this stuff at home on your own if you want to. This whole thing, of course, has some drawbacks. Number one, it takes some effort. You have to get this stuff and then you have to go in the dark and load it up and, wind them into these little canisters. It takes a little bit of your time. And if you're really, really pressed for time or you're really, really hands off in your film shooting, then bulk loading is very much probably not for you. It also just takes like a general amount of care when you're doing it because you don't want to ruin a 100-foot roll of film because that's a bummer. You want to try and keep things clean, the felt in the areas where the film is moving through. Things can get scratched or damaged while you're bulk loading if you're not careful and aware of exactly what's going on. Doing it too fast can also result in static damage, and static damage ends up leaving artifacts on your film even if you don't realize it in any way until after you're developing. And probably it's a good idea to load 1 or 2 rolls, shoot them and develop them to make sure that, especially if you're getting like a used bulk loader or like the canisters and everything, you want to make sure that you're not encountering any severe light leaks because that's also not a lot of fun. You're also gonna have rolls where the last shot on the roll is like ruined or only like partially exposed because you do have to pull out a bit in order to load up the canisters. You can get canisters that have DX codes on them, and you can also reuse canisters that also have DX codes on them based on the film that you're bulk loading. DX codes on canisters are really important primarily for like automatic cameras. So if your primary means of shooting film is a point and shoot camera, I say upgrade. But if you say no, then you can also make custom DX codes on these so that it will automatically detect the proper ISO of the film that you're loading into them. So it is kind of a drawback that there's not like bulk rolls available of all the color hits out there. A nice bulk load of gold or Ultramax would be great for just like convenient shooting for like cheap stuff. Bulk roll of Portra 400 is something that people I'm sure would lose their minds over, but Kodak seems to be really kind of spotty on the things that they feel like doing or are even capable of doing for the film community. Let's be honest. But if you are a really die-hard film shooter and you have either access to a lab that does like specialized film processing, or you are comfortable with developing color at home, which apparently a lot of people really are these days, then you can get 100-foot bulk rolls of motion picture film. Vision 350D, 200T, 250D, and 500T is all stuff that you can kind of track down. They normally come in big rolls of 400 feet, and if you have access to a lab or a darkroom yourself, then you can roll that down onto more manageable 100-foot rolls. Or there are places like the Film Photography Project that sell bulk rolls of motion picture film so that you can use them in bulk loaders. The only thing to keep in mind, of course, is that motion picture film has that extra remjet backing on it, which is normally dissolved and removed in the processing machines of large motion picture developing labs. Using that stuff for shooting stills means that that backing needs to be removed properly. It can't just go to a normal run-of-the-mill film lab and go through their processor, because it can kind of mess with the filters and the chemicals. But there is a ton of information for developing that stuff by yourself at home with the kits, primarily over at Cinesto's website. You can find a ton of those resources. And if you are really lucky on eBay, you can sometimes find 400-foot rolls of slide film, which Fuji used to put out for their Provia and Velvia stuff up until like 5 or 10 years ago, something like that. But there used to be bulk rolls of slide film, which I think would be very nice, but very expensive now. I really recommend shooting black and white film and bulk loading, because it lets you become really familiar with a certain type of film and grow and learn so much more by having this stuff on hand and sticking consistently to like a couple of basic film stocks. Yeah, it'd be nice if there was bulk rolls of color film, but it's probably not gonna happen. And shooting black and white means that you're setting yourself up for a little less disappointment as time goes on. Color film becomes harder to get and more expensive, and more often than not, just randomly discontinued, Fuji. And it's so cool. You'll be so cool. Everybody will want to be your friend. You can bulk load on your YouTube channel, or in the park, or casually in your living room, or in your bed. You can bulk roll when you're in the shower. It doesn't matter. Just bulk load to your heart's content. But also keep things in mind that I said so that you don't mess things up and come back here and be really mad at me. Thanks for watching. I'm Noah. This is Analog Resurgence. You can check some info down in the description below for a couple of resources, as I mentioned in the video, but also merch for the channel and the Patreon. That stuff really helps to support the channel and allow me to continue doing this stuff and explore bigger and bigger things and get people more and more interested in things like Super 8 and 16, stuff that I really love, but is also really expensive. So check all that out, along with Pro 8mm and the Film Photography Project. There's links for all that stuff in the description. And I will see you all soon, because I am going to bulk load. Huge thank you to everybody who contributed to the Patreon this month, and extra special shout out to Mark Lentz, Baron Snyder, Andrew, Taylor Brown, Chowie and Christ, Carson Fuller, Larry O, the Super 8 Skateboard Company, David Piranelli, Carly Baker, Dan Silvestri, Chris Beltiera, Kevin Heinzelman, Chaz Alling, Darren Martone, Jazz Scott, Georgia Nas, Jeremy McDonald, Ian Farber, Jeff Yoakum, Benjamin MacArthur, Brian DeMartin, Juliana Lepedalina, Django Scarupa, Derek Konigsberg, Orlando Perez, Thomas Wibley, Matt Bacon, Paul Snow, Travis Tobin, Charlie Acola, Ian Frank, David Kelsey, Scott Vansel, Jeremy Lee Camp, Jermaine Saez, Nth Labyrinth, Carta Manier, Jordan Wysong, Amadeus Farivold, Civilis, and Sarah Jeffrey.